Greetings, and welcome to the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. In each episode, host Kirill Tokarev invites video game industry leaders to talk about the world of game development. No topic is off limits as long as it relates to video game development. New episodes are in the works, so remember to follow us or subscribe and share with someone you know will also enjoy the podcast.
Thank you for joining us today. And today we have with us Andrew, and we're going to talk a little bit about the very interesting game that he and his team has been working on. But Andrew, before we jump into it, can you do like a little intro? Tell us a little about yourself, your team, where do you guys work, what do you do, and that kind of thing.
Sure. My name is Andrew. I'm the founder and CEO of Forust Studio. We are an indie game company based here in Malaysia. And we're actually releasing our first ever video game. It's called The Company Man. It's coming out on Switch early this year. Yeah, so we're really excited to share that with you.
So, how big is your company? So, you guys are based in Malaysia. Is video game industry big in Malaysia? Are there a
Uh,
lot of developers there?
Yeah, so I think comparative to US is tiny, but we're just starting out. So I'm one of the few indie developers that's popping up here. We have a big outsourcing scene, but we're starting to get more indie developers. My studio itself is just a four-person startup. On this project, we had collaborators around Malaysia as well, helping with us with the sound design, with the animation as well. Yeah.
So, how did you guys manage to pull it off? I mean, it seems like a very robust, big title with a lot of stuff to do in there, and there's wonderful graphics and beautiful music.
Yeah.
Animation is nice. How did you manage to do it with such a small team?
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that compliment. It's always nice to hear because I think my team is just amazing. What they've done. Because just to give you context, a lot of us, this is our first ever video game. So, and like I mentioned before, the indie scene here isn't like fully grown out or mature like in US. So we don't have a lot of like knowledge sharing that you can get in US. But I can say that the indie developers here are really close and they share whatever they have. But yeah, we're all pretty new to this. So it really took a lot of time doing the research and doing the work and just getting stuff wrong, experimenting, fixing it, and getting it right. Yeah, and I'm really proud to say, like it's not really a compromise. It's really a great product. It's excellent. I really love what we've made. The storytelling, the visuals, the color choices, the stylistic choices in the game is really a sight to behold, even for myself.
Andrew, when you were starting the game, how did you make a decision as to what engine to use? Did you go with Unity or Unreal, and why did you choose a particular tech?
Well, at first I was completely clueless, right? So I just started trying out a few different engines, but I think Unity had the best solutions for us. So we ended up going for Unity, mainly because we wanted to make a 2D game, right? So and the stylistic choice of using sprite sheets factored very heavily into
Mhm.
that. So Unity does have very strong sprite sheet support, and yeah, we care about every single frame and we debate every frame, and I think Unity's pipeline really supported that the best it could.
So let's talk a little bit more about the game. So in the press release that you guys sent, you said that it was heavily inspired by the Office TV show, which is, as you know, it's huge around the world and it's huge in US, although it ended, many years ago. People just love it. They just binge watch it all the time. So can you tell us a little bit about how this idea kind of came to mind? Because it's not something you would see traditionally when people are making their platform. It's usually
Yeah.
something like a fantasy game or a sci-fi game, and here you are taking like this mundane kind of idea of going, up the corporate ladder and turn it into this adventure. So how did you guys come up with this thing?
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know our game, the Comedy Man basically is a 2D platformer where you make fun of corporate culture, right? So you can actually hit your coworkers with a keyboard, you can shoot emails at them as you try to become CEO. I really got inspired from The Office because I love The Office. I am a huge fan of the show myself. I think my art director and I, between the both of us, we've watched it like 8 times. And I watch reruns when I'm like trying to fall asleep or stuff like that. So I really love the show. Well, when I started working, I realized some of these characters, they're not fantasy; they're actually real. They're actually people like that, you know. And I always thought, like, you know, corporate culture is funny. There's a different type of code that you operate in, and there's so many similarities between real life and video games. And you can really see it throughout our entire game, right? We make fun of how you get to get training certificates to get new skills and new abilities along the way. You have to drink coffee to survive and recharge yourself. And yeah, all these ideas came from you know, that the office, as well as discussions and experiences that we had around the office, like our office,
Did
our
you
studio. Yeah.
I kind of have to ask this question. Did you guys have any experience kind of working in a large corporation? Is this a thing in Malaysia when you know young people like in Japan or like in other Asian countries where people are kind of finishing graduating and then they're entering the corporate world and then they're slaving there like from 9 to 5 and late into the
Yeah.
night?
Yeah, I mean, especially for here in Malaysia, right? Because it's like the Southeast Asian region, so we definitely
Mm.
have a lot of companies like that. Even with like our family members and things like that. But of course, I will preface this by saying like the company I came from wasn't the sole inspiration of all this content, right? There are definitely like characters in there that are inspired, but I won't say like it was an evil corporation that I came from. But we really condensed each individual experience, and then we tried to play it out into this massive world that felt relatable to everyone in the world, because there are different types of bosses that you meet. You probably won't meet all these bosses at the same time unless you're working in a really bad company, right? But there's like a lazy boss, you know, there's a boss that like delegates all his work, and there's a boss that's just evil. And yeah, we have all like a dictator, we have all kinds of bosses. And we just thought we cram it all into one crazy company and then just let players have the chance to shoot them with emails.
Uh, Tell us a little bit about so that's actually one of my questions is that you have a lot of interesting kind of takes on the weapons that the guy, your protagonist Jim, is kind of carrying around. So he has a Zord that's actually a keyboard. He's shooting emails and you know all the kind of stuff. How did you guys kind of start, you know, ideating and figuring out how do you want him to kind of battle this corporate world? And there are
Oh,
like other like chainsaws and there's like moving blades and all the other stuff. There are ice monsters and there are you know fire and all that stuff. So how did you kind of ideate and come up with all those ideas?
well, I can't give you like an elegant answer because there wasn't like, oh, we found this, but definitely there were few core principles that we were working with. So when so I really like The Office, I wanted to have that very subtle humor and like subcurrent of humor that was going through the whole content. But I learned really quickly that you know, that show was a lot about the awkward pauses, the looks in the screen, and things like that. So actually, I really thank you for asking this question. Not a lot of people have actually asked me that. So when we ran into that roadblock of like we needed awkward pauses, we realized there's this interaction that happens in video games where the player can just walk away when things get like too quiet or silent, so they don't really feel that awkward silence. And we needed to make the characters more expressive, more exaggerated, so that they really pop out and feel alive. um, so then we went with our really strong Japanese animation influence, and we made the characters really lively, really vivid, and really bright. And yeah, so that it came from that Japanese animation melded with the office. Then after we realized, okay, how do we make environment hazard that fits into this world, that really feels like it belongs here? right? It can't be just a whole bunch of staplers on the floor and things like that. So we'll go through like a whole bunch of discussions, then we plan out, we throw out concepts, then we go through a concepting phase about jokes that we could make. Sometimes you just throw stuff at the wall. Then so for like accounting, the idea is that the aircon is left on too long, assets get frozen, which is a little accounting joke. Then actual assets fall down from the screen and they're frozen and they can hurt the player. There's razors on the ground and things like that. So yeah, that's how we sort of blended everything together and found design solutions for the game.
So, how long was the actual production? How long have you been working on the game?
Yeah. So yeah, when we completely from start, it actually took a process of 3 years. Um, yeah, 3 years. 3 years. It
So
just took 3 years.
during those kind of 3 years, what do you feel were like the most challenging periods? Like when did you feel like you had, the biggest problems, or you were like most insecure and you didn't know what to do? Because like a lot of our viewers and readers, they're actually developers themselves, and they might be struggling with the same kind of problems. So it would be nice if you can kind of tell us, when did you feel like the lowest, and how did you
Yeah.
get out of that rut?
Sure. Um, okay, so let me just start with like the lowest question. Well, I think for me personally, probably was the hardest at the start because I didn't know how to actually run Unity and how to write a line of code and things like that. So I had to learn there was a lot of like um context that I needed to learn how to operate things. On top of that, I had to learn how to run a production line, how to make sure like everything is timed out. Because when everyone started working on this project, right, they didn't even know how long their own personal work, like how long would it take to draw one character. They couldn't give me time estimates, or they gave me time estimates. Sometimes it would take longer than that. So yeah, that part was really tough. Like I felt like I was leading the team in the dark, and I had to figure it out. But I would say what really got me through that was a really strong team that I had. I think the team was really willing to learn and they were really hardworking, right? And I was in the trenches with them. We just kept trying to watch tutorials online, pick up stuff along the way. To be honest, it was a bit bumpy because we had to go through that process. When you start making a game, especially in pre-production, you don't get it right straight away. Then you sort of don't know what the issue is, but you know something's wrong. Uh, but then you sort of like guided by the light, which is like, is this fun? Is this really fun? Is this really compelling to someone who's never met us, never known us? So we had to go through the process of showing it to the audience. So everyone tells me, you got to show it to people as soon as possible. But I think what they don't tell is when you show it to them, then you realize they don't like it. You realize it's not something you want to hear. That's why people are afraid to show it to outsiders, right? So, but I think you just got to do it and you show it to people and you get the feedback. You go back to the drawing board, you do it again. So we have this saying, it's called experimentation is progress. That just encourages us to keep trying, right? And I think now looking at the product, because it's been a while since we went through that phase, and it's just to see how far I can't even imagine the people we were like in skill wise making something like this, right? Because we really came from nothing. And I'm just looking at it and I just feel so proud of what the team has done and the beautiful work they've created.
So, Andrew, can you talk a little bit about how you were kind of doing those demos? I know that you showed your game on different events,
Yeah.
and I think you went to PAX and all the other spaces. So, how did you kind of prepare for those events? Did you build like a special demo that for a particular event? Like, how did you work on the marketing? Did you do like a large booth or a small booth, or did you take part in like these kind of indie booths that they usually have on, when there's like a lot of smaller
Yeah.
games like in a row and stuff like that? How did you kind of approach that? And did you have like help from the publisher on this, or did you do it on your own, or how did it work?
Well, so for the earlier part, so there's many stages to this, right? Of course, when we got later, we showed it to bigger audiences. We even tested on this platform, for those of you developers who don't know, called G Round. So it's an international testing. It's a website. You can put your game on there. You can get feedback from people you've never met. Um, yeah, so it's really great. I really encourage you to do that. They give you a feedback report as well. Um, and you can just see like player analytics. But if you're like really like at the start like me, well, we started out with friends just coming over and playing the game. Some of my friends were very generously honest with their feedback and just told us some of the issues. But then also we have this really great community here in Malaysia called Game Dev Hangout. So it's a whole bunch of little indie studios. It's not that big. When we started, it was about like 30, but I think now we're about like 100. But we haven't met since the pandemic, so I'm not sure what's the full scope of things, but I'm assuming it's grown because the industry's grown as well. Then we just give each other feedback from a game developer standpoint. I think those are really great. So whatever country you're in, try to find the equivalent of that. Even if it's really small, I think people who are really actively trying to do games give really good feedback and really honest feedback as well.
So how was the initial feedback from like potential customers from gamers? Did they like it or did they don't not like it? And how did you kind of change the game to make sure that it resonates with the market? Because when I first saw some of the screenshots and I saw the trailer, I thought it was like a very good fit and it looked fun, and I'm sure people would love to kind of just play around it because the
Yeah.
topic itself, it resonates with so many people. So what were like the initial reactions?
Yeah, we always get that. Like people love this concept because I mean it's true, right? There's that corporate culture is something that's difficult that everyone faces, right? Even in a good company, you still run into themes like how do we deal with this marketing campaign? We have to work overtime, things like that. During stressful periods, you're trying to manage a production, so yeah, that's definitely something that people always jump on and they love and they just fall in love with the game as well. The feedback actually that we get from people, uh it's sort of, it's sometimes it's not very clear like what the issue is. Like I'll give you an example of how tricky it can be. Like sometimes people will be, because we're like making a 2D platform is like very specific. People do have a lot of expectations that they come into the game with, because 2D platformers are a very established genre, right? So they would have expectations like how do we jump from point to point. When they miss a jump, there's this thing called coyote time, where once you fall off a ledge, you can still jump, and that makes the game feel so much greater. Those were things that we will watch. Like people will give
Mm-hmm.
us feedback, like I'm missing this jump. I don't know why, or they're bumping their head on something. Then we will have to watch and listen and try to reiterate until we found that it. They just want a feeling of smoothness when they're playing the
Mm-hmm.
game. So we really fought for that, and we had to sometimes dig through the feedback to find things like that.
I gotcha. Tell us a little bit about the art style that you chose. So you kind of mentioned that you were inspired a little bit by Japanese animations and obviously The Office itself, right? Because there are like a lot of like little bits taken from there. But overall, I think you did an amazing job with how you kind of increased the proportions of certain characters or created some new animation loops when they were attacking you or something, like counting is attacking you or something else, like the big boss lives like in this golden room or wherever. So how did you and where did you find these ideas? How did you work on the styles to make sure that everything kind of looks the same, so it's not, just a mismatch of different things?
Yeah, so well, you actually asked like a few questions at one shot.
Yeah.
But let me just start with the art style. So in our region in Southeast Asia, we're actually like very heavily influenced by Japanese animation. when we got the team together, then we just started working on it. I think naturally we gravitated to the options that Japanese animation could bring for the content, because we realized that our characters were really small on the screen, especially for the 2D platformer. So we wanted a art style that could really pop out and be exaggerated, but still feel like it made sense. And somehow, when you play with Japanese animation, it sort of gives you the liberty to be a bit more crazy and wacky,
Hmm.
and that's where we get our wild wacky style for the game. Yeah, so that's how we landed on the art style. Then after that, we had to figure out how to do the animation, which was very difficult. We actually had a whole like character animation for the main character that we threw out, um, and because we realized that once you scale it down to a small size, if the player's not if the character's not really exaggerated, you can't really see his facial expressions, or like, in the office when you slant your eyebrows or something like, or someone makes an awkward comment, then you stare into the screen. You can't really do that um, with a 2D platformer, at least
Hmm.
with like as we tried to, right? So we went with this animation style. We decided to make everything super exaggerated, and I think, yeah, it came out looking excellent. Yeah, we really love it. Yeah, sorry,
So
did you have another question that I missed out? Because
no,
like,
no, no.
yeah.
I think you basically answered it. I do have one more question. So you are launching the game first on Switch, as far as I understand. So
Yes.
why did you go with this particular platform? And did you have any trouble kind of adapting the title to Switch? Because I know Switch right now is super popular among indie developers. There's like a lot of games coming out. And why did you choose it? Do you feel like there's a lot of people who would love this particular game, or aren't you afraid of like the competition that is on the platform?
Well, I can just give you a reference point, because you're saying most of your developers are, so most of your listeners are developers, right? So I'm not sure what the exact number is, but I think s- on Steam, which is PC, there's like about a few 100,000 games. Whereas on Switch, I think it's about I might be wrong on this because it's been some time since I checked the data, but I think it's about 4,000 unique games. Yeah, so, somewhere it's just a crazy number difference in the level of competition. So even though the competition is high on the Switch, it's not as high as other platforms. And I think PC gamers, yeah, PC gamers, like every screen is a bit different, every keyboard like controller is a bit different. But I think on console, and especially on Switch, you have people who I mean like everything is unified, everything is really clear cut, so the development process was actually quite like a lot easier. We just needed to focus on making sure it works on the hardware. um yeah, on top of that, I think we got to yeah, we managed to find an audience there that really connects with this content, because it's like our animation style. We also have a lot of people playing 2D platformers on the Switch, so we felt like it was a perfect fit.
Yeah, it does seem like it's a very good fit because people really love platformers. 'Cause I myself, I play a lot of platformers on Switch.
Yeah,
It's like and I use this system a lot because when my kid is watching television, I can't do anything else. So I kind of have to use the Switch, and that's
yeah,
why
it's
it works so
perfect.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect, exactly. So I do have one more question. So, are you guys working with a publisher on this game, or are you doing this alone?
We are working with a publisher. We're working with Leoful. So
Hmm.
basically, uh, yeah, we're collaborating with them to bring this game to the world. Yeah.
So, can you explain like why do you guys decide to work with a publisher? Is it because of like the global, scale, or maybe because you don't have the people? You said that you're like a small company, so you probably don't have like marketing managers or like people who are doing sales and so on.
Yeah.
And tell us, how do you work with this company? Because I know a lot of there are examples. For example, there's a guy who was creating Axiom Verge, so it's like a
Right.
Metroidvania kind of game, and it was being developed by one person. It's basically one guy creating the whole game, and his publisher is basically also one guy. He's like it's
Yeah.
like a former, I think it's one of the former Nintendo kind of people, and he's
Yeah.
kind of organizing everything with outsourcers or someone else, and he has all the connections and everything. So how do you guys see your collaboration with the publisher, and what are like the biggest advantages that the publisher brings to an indie studio like yours?
Yeah. So for the publisher, okay, we definitely love working with our publisher. If not, we wouldn't have signed anything with them. But I'm just trying to think from the perspective of your audience, what would be helpful for developers, like if they were in the decision to try to make the same decision as well. I definitely believe like it might be a bit old school for me to say that, if you're making your first game even now, it might be a good idea to consider going with a publisher for these reasons, right? I think marketing is really hard. And although now with social media, it's easier to get a global reach, you definitely can find people who support you online. Which, if you've got that and you have a massive following online already, that's wonderful, and I'm really happy for you. And but for a lot of developers, I think probably maybe you haven't started, you haven't built that brand yet. Going with a publisher definitely helps show you the ropes as well. How to write a press release, all these sorts of things that you have to go through. They also help with managing the storefront, the relationship between Nintendo and our company is managed through the OFO. Um, yeah, that so and of course I think marketing is actually expensive. It's not just a lot of work, it's also very expensive, to get press coverage, to get ads out, digital ads. Even if you're going on Facebook now, I think their algorithm has changed to favor more paid ads and sponsored content. So these were things like a small startup may not be able to afford. So going with a publisher might be the right move for some of you. But of course, if you really feel like you can do it on your own, I also think it's a good idea. Yeah, just make sure that you have a brand following that's willing to
Hmm.
support your brand. Yeah, and just take the steps that you need to go for it. Of course, there are some publishers that are willing to come in early as well, to fund your production. So for some people, that is the main concern, right? Not so much the marketing, but the funding of the project. Because games do take a really long time to make. They might take 3 years, they might take 4 years. A publisher can help smooth that out a little bit more with a pay schedule. Of course, I do encourage you to do your research as well to make sure that that publisher is legit and isn't out to scam you, because there are definitely a lot of horror stories that I heard, and I had to go through checking things out to make sure that the Leoful is the right fit for us. And I'm happy to say that I found a publisher that we could trust to work with. Yeah, that's been a load off our back. Yeah.
Andrew, so you mentioned one important comment, I feel, when you talked about the community. So you were building this community for the game, because community is basically one of the first targets you need to hit if you want to to make some sales, because this is like the first people that are gonna buy your title, and their reactions and the way they kind of spread the word about the game, it kind of influences all the other sales. And I'm wondering, how did you approach building this community, and what tools did you use? Did you because it's Switch on Steam, you can you can run your own page and kind of gather people around that page, and you can put it in wish list and all that stuff. But how did you do it with the release of the Switch version? Did you go on build your community on Facebook or Discord, or how did it work?
Well, for us, we're everywhere, right? So we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. So wherever you want us, you can reach us. We're even on Discord, and yeah. So I think it's really important to just every comment that you get when you're starting out is important, right? And even as you grow bigger, it's important. And even if you only have a few comments, I mean, even better, you should respond to them. Try to understand where the pain points are, if they have any complaints. Yeah, and I also would encourage you, sometimes it's really tough to get to hear something isn't working for your game, but you sort of have to stare into the abyss and address the issues, so that your game can get better. And I think through that process, it's just like any relationship, right? You have to look at it as a friendship. I mean, not as a friendship, but as a real relationship. If a relationship is healthy, it's not just one way, it's two ways, right? They're giving their feedback, you're responding to it, you're listening to them, and you're helping them out to really enjoy your content.
Right, Andrew. Thank you so much for the talk. I think it was very inspiring. And once again, we'll leave the links to the game so people can check it out and go and see it. And it looks wonderful. And I really congratulate you with this achievement and hope to see many new games from you and your team in the future.
Thank you, Kirill. I'd love to talk to you again soon.
All right. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks for enjoying another episode of the 80 Level Roundtable podcast. Check out upcoming episodes on the 80 Level website at 80.lv. Join our career site at 80.lv/RFP. And share our podcast with friends and on your social networks.